What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Taste Like Music. This is the Discovering Bob Dylan podcast. I'm here with Dylan, and we're zooming through the 1970s with Bob Dylan's discography here. We did Desire last week, and today we're on to Street Legal, an album that I think there's a very divisive take on this one from critics, fans. I've seen some, raves for this album from people on Twitter and in the Discord and everything, but it was not well received by the critics. And I can kind of hear why after listening to it a couple times. I know what the critics want to hear. This album does not deliver the Bob Dylan that people wanted to hear. I mean, this type of music is not what the critics wanted to hear in 1978. There's, other things happening, punk, new wave. That was the new hotness. This is the old sadness type of music that Bob Dylan is playing here. At least that's what they thought back then. I think we're past that. We're a little more advanced now here in 2024. We understand that this type of music it does not take backseat to punk or new wave or anything like that. Not to spoil my thoughts on this album. Dylan, welcome back to our fun time together. How do you feel about Street Legal? I don't know if I've heard you talk about it much.
Well, I think we should quickly before we get here, because how I feel about street legal somewhat plays into what comes before. We just talked about Desire. The last recording session for Desire took place on October 24th, 1975. 6 days later, on October 30th, they embark on the Rolling Thunder Review, which spans 57 shows between then and May 76, featuring Scarlett Rivera, Rob Stoner, Howie Wyeth, who are all in Desire, Mick Ronson on guitar, who obviously played with Bowie on a lot of his acclaimed records, played with Lou Reed on Transformer, bunch of other guest performers who had been associated with Bob in the past: Joan Baez, Roger McGuinn, Ramblin' Jack Elliott, a bunch of others. And man, this band is fucking hot. Later in 76, there was a live album release called Hard Rain, which was all culled from the second leg of the tour. But eventually in 2002, we got the Bootleg Series Volume 5, which covered the first leg, arguably the better leg of the tour. If I were to ever force you to do a bonus episode for a full bootleg series, it would be that one. I sent you the 3-song sampler of it. Did you check that out?
I did. I did not write down what songs those were, so you'll have to refresh. Um,
I sent you Tonight I'll Be Staying Here With You, and then Romance and Durango and Isis. And
I,
what'd you think of those?
I like them. I think I like them better than the album versions, to be honest with you. They hit a little harder. People now know my thoughts on Desire. I enjoyed it, but I was left a little wanting, just the style of it. I think live, it's just a little looser, and there's just more playfulness in the music, I think, which I was missing a little bit on Desire. The repetition got me a little bit.
Yeah, the energy on that version of Romance and Durango, I think, is truly incredible. And that version of Tonight I'll Be Staying Here With You might be my favorite Dylan vocal performance ever. He sounds great across the whole tour. It's so powerful and focused, and the band, to quote Almost Famous, is incendiary. But yeah, during the first leg of that tour, there's a lot of filming done for Ronaldo and Clara film, which, as massive a Dylan fan as I am, I've never actually seen. I think I've always been a little terrified of it. It's always been very daunting for me thinking about approaching it. Did you do any research on Ronaldo and Clara? Do you know what that film is?
I know that he was doing it, and I knew that like it wasn't like a feature film. It was like concert footage and vignettes, and I don't know if it was supposed to be like real or like, I'm guessing not, since it's called Ronaldo and Clara, that it wasn't like a true to life like biography of Bob Dylan.
Well, yeah, Ronaldo is Bob Dylan. Clara is Sarah Dillon, who he is divorcing at this time. It's 4 hours long. there's there's a lot going on there. But it takes up a lot of his time in 77. He's editing that. He's going through divorce proceedings. Halfway through the year, he starts writing what becomes Street Legal. He starts getting the band together. He becomes very obsessed with, having this big band go out again, kind of reinventing himself, and also very affected by Elvis's death in 77, which kind of informs earlier in the year he goes and does some concerts in Japan, eventually released on a live album called At Budokan, which has gotten a lot of it was critically trashed when it came out. It's gotten a lot of reappraisal in recent years. I am one of the people who will not be giving it a reappraisal. I can't listen to it. It's got this big Vegasy Elvis sort of thing, lots of flutes and saxophones, and really I don't know. I can't do it. We'll have people in the comments defending Budokan, talking about how great it is. You'd probably love it. I don't.
Sounds wonderful.
Yeah, if you like flute, you'll love it. So anyway, that all leads up to Street Legal. And I've had historically mixed feelings on this record. For me, there's a disconnect between the lyrical content and the actual sound and performances. Lyrically, I don't have any misgivings. I think it's the first album that he's written fully post divorce. I think it's a compelling snapshot of disillusionment, skepticism, confusion, a lot of themes and emotions that were present, obviously, on Blood on the Tracks, but now from the viewpoint of someone even further removed from the situation or farther along in the situation, whatever you want to say. I've said before, I consider Bob the greatest songwriter of all time because of how strongly he dominates every compositional approach, be that a story song, a love song, whatever it is, and you have that on full display on this record. You've got this great sprawling epic in No Time to Think, where he's kind of sorting through these confused emotions. A really great moody landscape in Senor, Tales of Yankee Power, which is my favorite track on the record. This icy directness on True Love Tends to Forget. Changing of the Guards, probably the crowning achievement of the record from a lyrical standpoint. A lot of foreshadowing of the upcoming Christian records, some of that imagery interspersed with what sounds like a very biographical song. And that's one half of the great bookends of the record. I think the closer, Where Are You Tonight, Journey Through Dark Heat, is also fantastic. But I have some other feelings too, but I want to hear what you think first, because I don't want to give it away, because I'm also very interested to see. There's a chance that we really, really disagree on this one, and I want to see if I'm right.
If I know you at all, I knew that this would not be your favorite Bob Dylan because it sounds really good and has no, it, because it is very much like of 1978. It is very friendly sounding to someone who likes, FM gold type, AOR even type music, There's lots of saxophones and instruments coming into prominence that you would not expect from a Bob Dylan album. I think there's a lot more instrumentation. I think Bob lets the music breathe here like he's never done in his entire career. If I have one fault with Bob, well, I have many, but the biggest one usually is that he just doesn't ever stop singing. He's always saying something. He doesn't let the music breathe enough. And I think on this album, and that is the style of the times, he just stops for a while. You get some nice sax solos, you get some nice guitar parts. It's not just, okay, here's Bob singing, 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 harmonica solo, and there's space and room for the musicians to really present themselves and their best work. I love the sounds of it. I love the organ. I'm a sucker for the saxophone. I know people probably find it cheesy, but that tenor sax, I like it, man. I like Boz Skaggs, and I like 70s, yacht rock. And I get a little yacht rock on this album, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I think it's a fun record. Might not be, totally fun lyrically, but the gospel backing vocals, the call and response, I really like that. It adds a lot. Bob, I don't think this is his best singing that he's ever done, but I think the melodies are incredibly strong. And I think with the gospel-y backing vocals, it makes it even better. And, lyrically, I'd have to really dig in deeper. I didn't, do too much of a dive into the lyrics of it. It seems Bob Dylan-y, and it's good. I mean, there's no dogs here. And I like the way it just shows off the change in Bob Dylan. He's divorced now. He I think this was post like the legal battle, getting custody of his kids. So he sounds, a little more upbeat on a lot of this. First track, changing of the guards, like there's some apocalyptic imagery, and maybe goes back a little biographical. But that rich female backing vocal part is great. There's that carnival organ, there's some horns. It just breathes really well. It's not overly Bob Dylan-y as far as like first chorus. There's bridges and there's instrumental parts, and it just, to me, who appreciates that type of music, I really like that. New Pony, which could have been a bore. I don't love his bluesier tracks, but I think it does enough here to be, dynamic, and it doesn't sort of fall into that laborious sort of just bluesy vamp kind of thing. It's a little bit more, the gospel vocals again help. There's a little more energy. The production could be stronger on this album. It's not quite as good as his 70s peers, especially 1978. A little more separation between the instruments would have been nice. A little bit murky, but at no point, and I think you maybe include me into this, and some other people were like, "Oh, the mix is terrible," blah blah blah. I think it's fine. It's nothing embarrassing. Just there's a better balance between the lyrics and the instrumental parts here. It's all played really well. I don't really know many of these players. I know Ian Wallace did some King Crimson work. He did some drums, and David Mansfield, violin and mandolin. But you got some Wrecking Crew people like Steve Douglas on sax, but it's not like big names, that prominent names. It's Dylan and whatever band he chose, and I think it's a step up over Desire and Blood on the Tracks as far as just their musical prowess. I like the Stax influence on a couple songs here. It's got a little bit of like Motown, a little bit of Stax influence. I get like a little Al Green type music. Love in Vain, a little bit on there. No Time to Think, I like a lot. It kind of reminds me of Springsteen, which is ironic because Springsteen wanted to be Bob Dylan, but now he's returning the favor a little bit. And Senor, I thought it was a little silly at first because it leans into the Spanish kind of mariachi-ness a little bit, but I think it's really well played and sung. I like the drums, some smoking guitar. I think it's a good story. And it's dramatic. I think Bob does a good job with the vocals, kind of making it dramatic and cinematic, like the cuica in there as well. I think Bob's vocals are very playful. True Love tends to forget, a little sprightly, a little more dynamic. And I like the cowboy guitar, kind of pedal. I think there's some pedal steel in there, the backing vocals. On We Better Talk This Over, got a little like country rock in there. And Where Are You Tonight, Journey Through Dark Heat is a great closer. Reminds me of like Rolling Stone a little bit, that organ part from Alan Pasqua. And just another song that just has like movement and dynamicism. and bridges and parts that you just don't normally associate with Bob. And I like that. I mean, I really enjoyed this album musically, probably more than any album since Blonde on Blonde, probably. Yeah, I mean, I get why critics didn't like it because it's not very Bob Dylan-like. It's very like FM radio 70s. It's got that gospel, probably the Elvis influence on those backing vocals, which I love. I think it's good. It's a strong 4 stars. I think I like it more than, I hate to say it, more than Desire or Blood on the Tracks, because I could just see myself listening to this at any time, like on the patio. Like this is an all-star patio record. Just go out and grill, throw on some Bob Dylan. I don't want to be too mopey. I want the fun, kind of exciting, dynamic Bob Dylan of Street Legal. So yeah, I don't know if it's like Steely Dan level or Boz Skaggs level, but I'd probably put it ahead of like Toto and some of those other late 70s artists. Listen, I like Bob. I like his 70s work. I just don't know if he's like up at the top as far as my favorite 70s artists.
Well, I love our friend Tavi too much to talk down on Toto on camera. So I won't do that. Look, I'm really happy that you liked it. I think in this series that we're doing, a win is a win. I said during the Planet Waves episode that you might like that record more than I do. You definitely like Street Legal more than I do, and that's great. That's kind of like an unexpected little caveat here. There's a few things in there I really disagree. Like I don't know what you were hearing or not hearing in Desire to think that that is not such a friggin' musically dynamic record. I think Desire is maybe the most musically dynamic record in his entire discography. Okay, so there are two aspects of Street Legal that have always given me a hard time. Firstly, this is the beginning of about a 10-year era of my least favorite voice of Bob's. That powerful holler that we just talked about on the Rolling Thunder tour, and you hear it on Desire, and you especially hear it on that recording of Tonight I'll Be Staying Here With You, those recordings of Isis and Romance and Durango. And now it's morphed into this really nasally shout. And whenever people do this Bob Dylan impression, they make him, they do the nasally thing. But going back to those records, you hear a very full-chested Bob Dylan singing. This voice is all here. It's very barky. Depending on the song or my mood, it's just not always my cup of tea. I don't even necessarily always like it's not always bad. And there are records and so many songs from these next 10 years that I love, but I prefer just about every other style of singing that he has utilized throughout his entire career to this one. And secondly, yeah, I do not love the production or the arrangements on this record. I do think the production is very muddy, and cue people in the comments talking about how you need to listen to the 1999 SACD mix or whatever. Like, okay, well, they need to make that more readily available because it's not in the box set that I have. It's not on streaming. As far as I know, it's not on vinyl. So many of Bob's best albums don't sound like anything else by any other artist from any era. Highway 61 doesn't sound like anything else. Blonde on Blonde, nothing else. Desire, nothing else. If you switched out Bob with Warren Zevon on this record, I wouldn't bat an eye. And frankly, as a huge Zevon fan, I might prefer it. I enjoy similar instrumentation and production stylings on other albums from around this time, but the sound of this album feels stale to me. The combination of his voice, the background vocals to me are so disjointed. Like, I don't think they ever sound in place at all. The over prominent saxophone does not work. And I'm not anti, look, I love Clarence Clemens. I love Alto Reed. it's not necessarily an anti-sex thing. It is not my favorite instrument in rock music, but there are times, and I think it's really great on certain songs, especially Senor. But it doesn't fully work to me. Bob obviously rarely took the time to painstakingly labor over, you know, the perfection of his arrangement, getting the perfect take. We're now in the time period where, Lindsey Buckingham is putting Fleetwood Mac through hell to get these perfect takes. And you listen again, going back to Zevon, and now I'm like Excitable Boy, which sounds fucking pristine. Bob's typical approach, it works great on the 60s trilogy. The combination of the band and the production, I think, makes it work perfectly on Desire, especially because so much of Desire is so like propulsive, I guess. I normally gravitate towards the ramshackle approach. I relate to the ramshackle approach, but Street Legal feels messy. These songs just feel messy to me. I don't think that they're that well performed. I don't think they're poorly performed, but I don't think the rhythm section sounds all that great. I don't think there's anything super there's some guitar licks here and there. So, some things happening here and there. I don't know. It is, that's just our ears hearing things differently. I think it is a far cry from Desire. And there's a couple tracks I really don't like. I can't do Baby Stop Crying, especially with the background vocals. I think Is Your Love in Vain is a well-written song, but I've never cared for it much. But yeah, it's that Vegas Bobby shit that I don't like. I don't get the more is more approach. Like, if you're gonna throw the kitchen sink at something, make it worth it. Like, just to have something be so dense for density's sake does nothing for me. I don't see the point in it. It's partly why, and you have rarely heard me say this up to this point. One of the few Dylan covers that I massively prefer, maybe the only cover that I distinctly massively prefer, is a songwriter and guitarist I really love. His name is Chris Whitley. Him and another musician, Jeff Lang, covered Changing of the Guards on one of Chris Whitley's last records before he died, called Dislocation Blues. They strip it down. It showcases the brilliance of the writing. They replace the Benny Hill saxophone with a steel guitar. It sounds absolutely fantastic. Also, I probably prefer the Dead Weather's cover of New Pony. The Dead Weather on their first album covered New Pony, and they turned it into a kick ass blues rock. I like this song. I like New Pony fine enough on the record, but I prefer those covers, which, look at the tides turning here. You standing up for Bob while me saying that I prefer other people doing some of the songs on the record. There's just an itch that this record doesn't fully scratch. And the more time that I've spent with this record over 15, 20 years or whatever, the more I appreciate it, and I like it. It's a 3.5 star record for me, probably. There's some great songs on here. I think I've got 6 of the 9 songs on my ultimate favorite Dylan playlist. I've obviously name checked Senor. Where Are You Tonight is really one of my favorites. True Love Tends to Forget. Jason has, I don't know if it's his favorite Dylan song or just his favorite non-famous Dylan song or whatever it is, but I think that's a great one. But I think it's a flawed record and is not at all. You're talking about it like your new go-to Dylan record. This has never been, probably will never be my go-to Dylan record, but I do like it. I just don't love it. And I think it is not even a speck as good as Blood on the Tracks or Desire. I shouldn't say that because the writing is so strong on this record. Like, I mean, the Changing of the Guards is a lyrical masterpiece. Where Are You Tonight, Senor? Lyrical masterpieces. I shouldn't say it's not a speck as good, but in terms of what I want to listen to, I mean, Blood on the Tracks is probably a top 10 album of all time, and Desire is fantastic. And Street Legal is a very good Bob Dylan record.
Well, it doesn't sound like you think it's a very good Bob Dylan record. I think maybe
It's
good.
a good Bob
Good.
Dylan record.
yeah, I mean, as a Bob Dylan agnostic, I find this just more pleasing to my ears because just
Sure.
instrumentally, it has more of the things I like. It doesn't have the repetition. Every song has like a flow to it from here to there, and it's not, going backwards and redoing the verses and sort of, maybe a lazy chorus in there. Like all of these songs just have more of that melody, like more of that stuff that I'm looking for. The variation in these songs is far, 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 far more than Desire. Desire is very, very, very repetitious.
I mean,
It
changing of the guards and No Time to Think are pretty damn repetitious. I mean,
the,
I don't know.
I mean, they repeat, but I don't know, there's something about them with the instrumentation that just never once was I like, oh my God, can this song end? Like there was no Jack, Rosemary, Lily, Lily Hearts, or Desire. Desire was good, and I appreciate the violin, but it was very much like, okay, here's another violin part, here's another violin part, and it didn't change it up enough for me. Like the variety in Desire, I just feel like this has more of the variety and expands Bob Dylan's sound more than any other record that I've heard from him since Blonde on Blonde, which was, you know, very, very out of the Bob Dylan, standard that he had established on the first two of the trilogy. To me, Street Legal kind of does that in its own way after Blood on the Tracks and Desire. It's not as
Yeah,
good
yeah,
as Unblonde. I'm not going to be crazy about it, but as far as like an album I'd want to listen to like casually, this is up there for me.
that is ultimately a good thing. Like, truly, I'm not being facetious at all. Like, I'm if we listened to 40 albums and there was only one of them you like, I would view that as a win. Thankfully, that hasn't been the case. But like every new record that you find something to enjoy in is fantastic. This isn't my Dylan record. I don't like him sounding so anonymous, I think he sounds anonymous on this record. I think he sounds like he's trying to do something else that other people are already doing, and they're kind of doing it better. Even an album like, well, I was gonna say an album like Planet Waves, he's not really trying to sound like anyone else, but I mean it's the band, and they're just kind of sounding like the band sounds in 1973 and 1974. I don't know, but even records where he's not going for anything like super crazy or big, even an album like New Morning, obviously, which I've talked about as being one of my favorites, like he's not trying to do pet sounds on it, but it still ultimately sounds so much like a Bob Dylan album to me. And this sounds like relatively poorly produced 1978 record to me, with incredible songwriting and like still good enough for me to ultimately enjoy, but just in the scope of his entire career and what I normally enjoy out of him, it just doesn't get there for me all the time.
Well, I'm not surprised about that, and I'm not surprised that I dig it after, listening to it and reading up on it. I mean, they were very unkind to it in the big Bob Dylan book that I have. Like a lot of the blurbs were like, well, it's not a very good performance. Bob kind of phones this one in, but um,
Yeah, I wouldn't even say he's phoning it in. I think his vocals are very passionate. It's just if I'm not in the mood for it, like I said, it's just not. But also, basically his voice from like John Wesley Harding through Rolling Thunder, like he didn't miss for me. Even when he went country, it sounded great to me. When he had that kind of early '70s rasp, it sounded good to me. Everything the big holler on Desire, Rolling Thunder, like it's all great to me. And this, it's just not my favorite. Well, we've got one more for the '70s, and this is the
talk about
moment.
a changing of the guard.
Woohoo!
This is where
Great
things get
reference.
interesting. This is where things get interesting.
This is great. This is one of the reasons I've been so excited for this because there's so many records in this discography where when you look at the just the premise of this show, there's so many points where you can say the moment we've all been waiting for, we were waiting for the Electra trilogy, and then we were waiting to see what you thought of Self Portrait, and then we were waiting, is how is he going to feel about Blood on the Tracks? And we've long made reference to the Christian trilogy, to Bob becoming born again, and there is a slow train coming. You know about this album, certainly just from hearing people talk about it. We did a guest spot with our friend Canadian Stud Muffin a while ago, where he mentioned this is his favorite Bob Dylan album. Have you ever listened to it though? I'm sure you probably know "Gotta Serve Somebody," right?
I don't know if I've ever heard anything off this album, to be
Okay.
honest. I have heard a little bit of, I believe, was it? No, let's say Shot of Love. I've heard a little bit of, but yeah, I'm pretty much a neophyte when it comes to the Christian trilogy. I've been avoiding it purposefully, but now I have no choice but to dive in here.
So, what are your hesitancies, if any, going into this? Is it simply like, do I want to listen to Bob Dylan of all people preach at me? Is it an aversion to, this style of, well, it's not even a style of music so much as it is a thematic aspect of it.
I mean, for me, just because I've never been that into Bob Dylan, I always assumed that these were not well received, and why would I waste my time outside the classic period? So, I'd heard Street Legal before, and I'd heard Desire before, and Blood on the Tracks before, years ago. And then I was just like, well, I think I can stop here. This is the Christian trilogy. Then it's the 80s. Like, there's no need to get down that rabbit hole. I'll stick to the 60s, the 70s. So even though I know Mark Knopfler's on here, and
Mhm.
Jerry Wexler production. And the reviews aren't terrible, but I just never had an inkling to go Christian Bob.
Well, I would say going into this one, the main thing to remember, or the main thing that I would keep in mind, is that Dylan with Street Legal, he just got himself back in your good graces, and he's actually sneakily done this a few times now. You've been ready to count him out. You were ready to count him out after John Wesley Harding, and Nashville Skyline got you back in. And it's only ever possible to think so highly of the 1973 records, but Planet Waves got you back in. And then the two heavy hitters from the mid 70s, you maybe found a little disappointing. He keeps reeling you back in. So I'll say with this one, just remember that he brought you back in, and he did that for a reason, and you deserve to trust that, and you deserve to trust him. So that's what I'll say going into it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it can't be too terrible. It's got the Muscle Shoals, some horns on here. You got Mark Knopfler. I like Street Legal. I mean, this is a year later. Lyrically, I mean, I don't think he would be a bad Christian, theologist. Um, so I'm not expecting like real heavy-handed as far as not like a New Testament sort of Bible chapel type songwriting here. So I feel like it's going to be a little more in the Bob Dylan spirit of things, even though he's going to talk to me about Jesus and such. I think it'll be in a tasteful, beguiling Bob Dylan. He's saying one thing, he's meaning another. It'll be a fun literary treat, I believe. Maybe it'll suck. I don't know. See.
What I'd like to do from now on is, rather than starting these shows just with the theme music and the thumbnail, is right before it, I'd like to cut that little clip of you saying, "Well, it can't be that bad," and I want that to play before every single episode.
I'll throw that in the next episode at the beginning, a little
You're
tease.
your last words before going into every Bob Dylan.
We'll see if I still think that around, Blood Red Sun or whatever the hell it's called.
Under the under the red
Under
sky.
the under the red sun,
Well,
we'll
yeah, well,
see.
I feel okay. I feel cautiously optimistic going into this next one, and really, I'm happy for you, and I think a lot of people watching this are gonna be happy with you. Maybe the Dylan fans in the comments, the people on my side, maybe they won't be as happy to hear you say you like it better than Desire and Blood on Tracks. Although again, a third shout out to our Norwegian friend Ausmund. I believe that this is his not only his second favorite Dylan album to Desire, his favorite Dylan album, but unless I'm wrong, they might be his two favorite albums ever by anyone. So he's a Street Legal fan. Your co-host Jason is a Street Legal fan. We've got there are many of them out there. There will be many of them. It's definitely one of those records over the years. It's gotten a lot of reappraisal, much like New Morning has. And it's certainly not one of those things where you need to pick sides, but I happen to very much be on the New Morning. I have a few pet Dylan albums. There are a few more that we haven't gotten to yet. Street Legal's just not one of mine. But I will say that I like it more now than I ever have. I don't think I'll ever love it. I'm so happy to finally arrive at the first album that I think we can definitively say you like it better than I do. So there we go.
That's nice. I'm interested to see in the comments if there will be like the haters, like the Bob Dylan like longtime fans that are like, he lost me at Street Legal. Do those people exist, or is it still going to be like, well, I don't love it, but it's still the fourth greatest album of all time because it's from Bob Dylan?
I think I don't know anyone who personally at least, and I can't recall reading anything by anyone who views it as like the nadir of his catalog or anything like that. I think some longtime fans are more likely to say he lost me at the Christian trilogy, and specifically really with Saved, the second record in the trilogy, because Slow Train Coming is one of those records that has its fan like outside of Dylan fans. There are people who really admire for the Mark Knopfler of it all, or for whatever other, and you'll see why. But to my knowledge, whatever the critics said, I don't think there's too many fans that viewed this as terrible. But I was not around in 1978, so feel please in the comments school me, school us. I've never claimed to be the expert. I'm just a super fan doing his best. And you're also doing your best, Joe. And I appreciate that.
Well, I'm trying. I'm giving it the old college try here. I think that's it for Street Legal. Let's hear how you feel about it. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Is this, the turning point in your Bob Dylan fandom, or are you sticking with him for a couple more years? Love to see the comments. Keep them coming. As always, like the video, subscribe to the channel, check us out on social media. Check the description for that. Join us in our Patreon and our Discord. It comes along with it. Very cheap. You get to talk to me. Dylan's there all the time. I don't know what he's doing. He's not getting paid for this. Uh, he is. We're compensating him very well for his
Yeah,
hours and hours spent being disappointed in me. We are paying him for the honor.
the sting hurts less when I hop in my Maserati
Yeah.
afterwards.
That's right. This is all, yeah, it's all a sham. He's well taken care of. Join us next time. We're jumping in the Christian trilogy, both feet into Slow Train Coming, and yeah, we'll explore that next time here on the Bob Dylan podcast. We'll see you later.